this way. That's it. Okay, back. No way to trip when you're going backwards with the fins instead of forward. Now pretty soon we'll be in the water and then all that weight will be off you. Ready?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, what we're going to practice today, again, is getting the water out of the mask underwater.
First, can we do a little swimming before I clear my mask?
You want to try? We'll just swim along the bottom a little bit together.
Yeah.
And we'll see how our weights are. All right, here we go.
Here in this secluded cove on the eastern coast of Maine lives a remarkable American family with the nicely ironic name of Waterman. Beckoned by a world about which almost nothing was known, Stan Waterman traveled far from this place.
It is my conceit to bring dainties to my mate.
He was one of the first Americans to strap an aqualung on his back and slip into the last undiscovered regions of this earth. Over the next 40 years, his has become the most esteemed and authoritative voice in American diving. His work as an underwater filmmaker and adventurer are a poet's legacy and a record of our understanding of the life of the seas. I'm Peter Benchley, and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to this good man, my friend. A man who has stepped into the adventure of life as simply and entirely as he might step off the side of this boat into a world of beauty, joy, and enthusiasm.
Okay, if I could have the camera, please.
The treasures he's discovered there, he's brought back for the world to share.
See you down there. Hey, Jesse, how about taking the forward hatch off? All right, put it up on the cabin trunk, please. And Jesse, look out, there's an alligator attacking you from the stern of the boat.
If there is a single word that sums up Stan Waterman, I think it is grace. He is the last cavalier. He is a man who lives in many ways in the 18th century. The sense of honor, the sense of duty, the sense of responsibility, the sense of fair play, all of which are thought by many people to be completely obsolete at the moment, operate his daily life.
Okay, Parker? Okay. All right. Good show, Ponker. Oh, I tell you, this grandson is going to be a comfort to me in my old age. All right, it's time to ride back. Ponker, look what's going on here.
Perhaps more than anything else, he's a dreamer and a romantic, and he's kept room in his life for those things. I'm pleased that so much of what he loves in life he has been able to do, and have so much of the sea, which is his true first love. And he still goes out on these expeditions like a little boy on a first dive. It's astonishing, and that's probably the key to life, is enthusiasm and affection for what you do. And he has it, still has it.
There is Rodney St. John, that man who doesn't know the meaning of fear. If you look closely, you'll see Rodney colliding with Alaskan salmon on their way up the falls. Fortunately, there were 4 feet of water in the bottom to cushion that incredible leap. What a man. And then the entire family, in an act of mass genocide, peeled off over the top. Nothing like it had been known in the history of Tahiti.
When we were growing up, the things that my father did seemed completely normal to us. This is what he did. And we took it at face value that he'd been off diving with white sharks, or that he was the first one to go out of a cage with sharks in open water. Okay, terrific. That's what Dad does.
Of course we think the old man is remarkable. And,
Wonderful and funny.
Yeah,
And
and always
well
has his
spoken.
sense of humor, no matter how grim the situation may
well,
be.
not quite, but
Well, in general. Except when I ding his car, maybe, and he loses his
Or when
sense
his
of humor.
camera floods, which is not an unusual occurrence underwater.
That whole T.S. Eliot exercise could only be matched by James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake.
For incomprehensibility to
Exactly.
18-year-olds.
Exactly.
Stan knew Robert Frost, studied under him, and by happy design took some of Frost's most celebrated words to heart. To paraphrase Robert Frost, 2 roads diverged in a forest, and Stan took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
It started with a Japanese Amo diver's mask. The Amo divers were the Japanese pearl shell divers, the ladies, and they had had masks like the ones that we have today 100 years before they appeared on our market, and one was given to me as a curiosity in the 30s when I was a schoolboy, I suppose about 14 or 15, and on a Christmas holiday down to Florida, I went into the water, put on this curiosity, opened my eyes, and was hooked for the rest of my life. The appearance, just in a news item in the paper, of the invention of a piece of diving equipment by a man named Cousteau, nobody had heard of here at that time, that enabled you to go underwater with an air tank on your back and breathe at whatever pressure depth you went to, was so electrifying. It was as if a rocket that could take you to the moon tomorrow had been presented in your backyard. I can remember shivers going down my spine and prickling to think of it. And I had the first aqualung in the state of Maine by mail order, the first suit called a seal suit that was sort of latex like a girdle, and you had to wear underwear under it anyway. And Susie took our old 16mm camera and filmed me walking into Walker's Pond up over the hill beyond the house on a November day with a little group of friends sort of biting their nails and watching, and that really set the hook. And Walker's Pond is a main pond, and there's nothing in it. But I walked out over my head, went out and sat on a rock, and breathed underwater. And it was a Jules Verne experience, of course. No big bass, wall-eyed bass came and looked at me. I'd like to say, that a giant pickerel glared at me, but it was just as exciting as if I'd been down with a white shark, just going underwater, and came out, and I think I yelled, "Eureka!" Look at this. I'm going in through the wrong strap here. Oh, yeah. I put my whole foot in through the wrong strap. Oh.
You'd think you hadn't done this before.
Stan is the least macho adventurer I've ever met in my life. He does not radiate a sense of danger, a sense of macho recklessness. He radiates a quiet sense of dedication and expertise.
It's gonna happen. Like magic, his head will appear.
Now, this is not to say this is a man without an ego. He has got a very healthy ego. He knows how good he is. He knows what he has done. He knows what he's capable of doing.
Let's go. I'm ready for a moonwalk.
But there's a difference between a person who demands attention and a person who commands attention in the sense that he would never demand attention, and yet when he walks into a room, you can't ignore him. He fills the room.
Wouldn't it be lovely if we discovered, once we're in these sweatsuits, that there's an El Nino and the water is 85 degrees at the bottom?
What's El Nino, the guy who always terrorized Zorro?
He's the matron de hotel at the Pierre.
Oh. Once again, they descend into the Mother Ocean.
I still love diving, and I'm very grateful to it because there aren't so many professions that you can be in that regenerate the enthusiasm that you feel about them going to the office each day or whatever it is. I think it was Tennyson in his Ulysses, who, speaking for Ulysses, who you remember was always moving to a new horizon, said that for all experience is an arch wherethrough shines that undiscovered land, whose margin fades forever and forever as I move. And so each excursion into the sea has the possibility of something fresh and new. And here at the age of 67, it is still unfolding and fresh. You know, I do love diving. I love the profession which has given me in return so much in my life.
Wacko. Get your wood from Taiwan?
Did I get my what from Taiwan?
Your wood from Taiwan.
I remember the first impression of being outraged. Peter's picture was on the cover of the magazine section of the New York Times Sunday. Big feature. Making of a bestseller with a picture with a white shark by Ellis behind him. And I said, who is this guy? In Pennington, I read, who's gotten all of this flack about sharks and the whole thing, and I'm supposed to be the expert, and nobody pays any attention to me.
I'm Peter Benchley. The man who was going to film whatever happened was a friend of mine, Stan Waterman. He had spent a quarter of a century diving with sharks and had done a lot of the photography for the feature film Blue Water, White Death. It moved with a slow, ambling self-confidence. Nothing would threaten it. Nothing dared to challenge it. Then, as he came in to feed, there was the deep, visceral horror of the worst death imaginable, to die by being eaten.
Aging adventurers seek great white shark around the world, pompous asses all.
What are you doing with the armadillo?
I have an armadillo with two big Triton shells flanking him on either side.
Right, maybe a cracker or two for the armadillo to eat. Doesn't everybody have an armadillo on their dinner table?
I think it's safe to say that Stan could not exist without his wife, Susie.
That's all right, presenting myself to your mother's family as an educated man. I told her mother that I was reading Thucydides.
I think Stan and Susie are a wonderful match because they are completely different personalities. He is a public personality who loves having his expansive personality out there and being appreciated.
Oh, Stan, you mean Thucydides.
Susie is a private person, very concerned with raising the children, keeping a sense of proportion in their lives, anchoring him and the family to reality.
Drunk is he who prostrate lies without the power to drink or rise, but not drunk is he who from the floor can rise alone and still drink more.
Oh, well said, George.
The three Waterman children are very good reflections of both parents in a way. They've all got a bit of their mother's thoughtfulness, and yet they all are gregarious and articulate, and they have a love of language, which, needless to say, one sees in Stan.
There's a much shorter and happier version. It goes like this. Fill the cup up to the brim, goodness out, and evil in.
Here, here. The traditional toast, because our guest of honor is my best friend, and I only make this once a summer. And if I sort of blubber or catch a little bit, it's because I always feel that way. In honor of the man who built this house, my father, to whom we all owe what we have here, to WEW.
Cheers, Toad.
Cheers to WEW.
The whole family structure was very different from what it was when I was growing up here in the 30s. Dad had his marriage and his children very, very late in life.
My father was brought up in a very wealthy home. His dad was a cigar manufacturer in Newark, New Jersey. They lived in Montclair in an enormous old brick mausoleum. And I think my father was born when his father was close to 50 years old.
He was in the twilight of the Victorian era, coming out of the upstairs-downstairs structure that time. Children are to be seen, not heard at the table. Chewing or masticating 35 times each mouthful.
And milk.
And everything as we sat there, going like
He was
that.
given over to the care of German governesses and trotted out each evening in his little sailor suit and his Buster Brown shoes to be presented to Mom and Dad. Say hello, and then back you go to the nursery.
There were all kinds of structured routines, and I had nobody to play with. And I played a great deal in tide pools, used my imagination, ran around playing Robin Hood by myself, did things with the boats, pirate things, but pretty much alone. And a sense of adventure is sometimes engendered by fantasy like that. Solomon Islands are one of those exotic diving areas that draw divers in a growing sport today. People looking for new places to dive, new exciting experiences underwater. So these people have come to spend 2 weeks with me on the Billikiki. And you're
Hi, Tracy Hawkins. I met you a long time ago in Chattanooga.
in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Tennessee. Terrific. It enables me to keep wet, use my cameras, perhaps build up stock footage, and always have fresh experiences underwater. Heavens, there's another senior citizen here with me.
Watch that.
We're going to have some races. I'm glad to see you, brother. The Solomon Islands are probably synonymous with the single name Guadalcanal, the Green Hell. The Marines landed here for our first engagement in the Pacific arena in the Second World War. And this is a graveyard of shipwrecks, many of them much too deep to dive on, but many are diveable. They are time capsules. Is this actually your first ocean dive?
Yeah, just watch me go in.
Has it been swimming pools before this, or
Swimming
quarries?
pools and a spring. I'm just afraid that this is going to be a letdown, any other dive after this.
Tracy, it is going to spoil you. Well, you're going to take to this like a seal, aren't you? I'm sure it's going to be
so.
It's going to be all grace. Have a good one.
Thank you. It's good knowing you.
It's been about 45 years since I had my first dive, and I still remember it as if it were yesterday, and you'll never have another like it.
Well, Stan, I think I'm going to stick right next to you, and I'll Okay.
Well, now, are you enough professional to use the vulgar system of spitting into your mask?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, yes.
Even Jacques Cousteau does that, you know.
Well, then it's okay, right?
Right.
He does it the French way.
Yes, right, and it's redolent of garlic and escargot.
Thank you.
Oh, oh! I think I'm just going to stay here for the dive. The equipment seems to be cumbersome when we're on the surface, but the moment you drop into the water, all the weight is shuffled away from you, and your body feels free. There's space around you, your movements slow down, you have time to watch and think. You become very aware of your own life process, because each breath is audible in the exhalation of the bubbles above you. And always, incidentally, the bottom is crackling with sound, mostly by little invertebrate animals, shrimp, crabs, and so on. Fish make sounds too. So it is not entirely silent, and yet it is far more silent than we know when we're in the company of other humans. See a beautiful girl with her leg caught in a giant clam, attacked by sharks. Of course, the fact is that you cannot get caught in a giant clam. The mantle is so soft that you can pull out very easily. But they are huge. They can weigh over a ton. I'm not sure how old they get, but possibly over 100 years in their time of growth. The shapes that one encounters underwater are always soft. You know, one of the ways that you may discern a wreck is by a single straight line or a symmetrical line, something that has been created by man, even though it may be buried in the bottom. So that's what you look for when you look for hidden wrecks, because they differ. Anything that man has made differs from that smooth, rounded form that you find in all of the sea animals. Let me help you up.
That was wonderful.
Hey, terrific. The first dive is something special any time. Put it on me there.
Can I be a part of your team now?
You're on, you bet.
Hire me.
We won't give one to Tuna. These are all for us for dinner time, aren't they?
Should we bring the pig over?
Don't let Tuna have one.
Tuna!
Here's a good pig. I went to college, went to Dartmouth, had those experiences with Robert Frost that meant so much to me. Majored in Shakespeare, not having any idea what I was going to do, but went on to graduate work at Columbia University in political science, thinking that a life of diplomacy, foreign travel, would be a fine adventure. Before I got my master's, I became overwhelmed with what I call academia and made a break for the country. We came up here. I was married just before graduate school, and Susie and I came up here to do one of the 3 things you may do to earn a living in Maine. You either harvest lobsters, you cut trees, or you grow blueberries. And I became a blueberry farmer. Into those long, cold winter evenings when the blueberry land was asleep, you sort of marked time with making furniture and repairs and a lot of reading by the fire, came an article by Cousteau in the National Geographic about diving in the Red Sea. And I was so fired by the experience he was having and the thought that this man, this incredible man, was making his mark and earning his living, involved in an adventure that I would very much like to be a part of myself. The genesis of a thought came upon us, and that was that maybe what was required was taking a chance, stepping out and doing something, taking a chance, making a move that has some risk to it. I think what Conrad said, the way is to the destructive elements submit yourself, and by the exertion of your hands and your feet in the water, make the deep, deep sea hold you up. And it means you've got to take a chance. So the idea came about to build a boat at a nearby boatyard. They built lobster boats. Lobster boats are wonderful with broad sterns. And I knew what I wanted for diving, and the Zingaro got built with aqualung racks in the stern and a flying bridge, and we mortgaged the place and took it down to the Bahamas.
So you got down to the Bahamas. What happened then?
Did you know anything about the bends? Did you have any idea what you were doing?
Herman, we didn't have a clue for the most part. It's a wonder where any of us are alive today.
Oh, really?
You know, there were no certification organizations. The first brochures that came with the first scuba equipment, which was Cousteau's aqualung, that just don't hold your breath when you come up. The Navy tables were taken terrible license with. We didn't have the computers we have today. And there were a lot of deaths those first years, too. We spearfished like mad, and spearfishing, of course, was the catalyst to shark attack. Right. But back in those days, we were afraid of almost everything that had teeth. Barracuda were thought to be the terrors of the sea. Sharks, of course, would attack on cue. And moray eels that are now played with and handled lovingly were terrifying. But man is the threat in the sea. We're the unwelcome visitors. The onus is on us to leave it as we find it and to be honored, perhaps honor is maybe the wrong word, by the attention of any of those animals who take us into their affection.
And there they go.
There they come. Coming right through the ranks of jacks. I've never seen anything like it. I'm amazed at the depth of field on this. Tremendous shooting, Gary. Just excellent.
Right by you there, Herman, those tapes? No, the one standing up. Yes. There we go.
Do you want to show all 3 of them?
Is this the 3 hours of your youngest son learning how to swim?
Okay, this is a shot of Stan. What I was always impressed about Stan was that his camera is always rock steady. Stan's waving in the breeze, but the camera's steady.
You didn't see me when I was filming Jacqueline Bissett in her wet t-shirt. The camera lurched and faltered. Nice light behind. Good shot. That's a lovely shot. Look at the mosaic on that fan. Excellent. Excellent. Those bubble rings were irresistible. Perfect.
There we go.
There they go. While you were filming the sea fans and the crinoids, I stayed back on the boat, and Kay gave me a big tuna up over the side, and to our amazement, I was able to film the scene I'm going to show you right now. Wasn't very much, actually, but really sorry about
I think
that.
I'd rather be on the boat.
That's why you stayed in this afternoon.
His whole lower jaw is unhinged to do that.
Exactly. The teeth are on motile gums, and the whole gum the teeth go right in. That is some animal. Those early days were a scramble. We had to take another mortgage out for that boat to get it going. We stayed for 3 years, just winter season. Nobody went to the Caribbean and the Bahamas in the summer in those days. The children went to school down there, and the blueberry farming took over in the summertime. But I wanted to see many more oceans, and filmmaking evolved, and that was the way to travel farther afield. Use other people's boats, shoot films, and those early years were showing the documentaries that I made on the gumshoe circuit out in the Bible Belt, the Kiwanis screen tours, 162 lectures a year. Living out of a trunk of a car, traveling across the United States, but it brought in enough money to go on to a new film and to keep things going.
Dad was gone a good deal of time when we were children, and my mother's really the one who brought us up until we got to be in our teens, and then we went off periodically with him on trips. But certainly Mom was a single parent, and all that goes with it, all the hardships that go with being a single parent, really rest with her.
To Susie fell the onus, really, of bringing the children up in those early days, because I was off working and traveling and off on expeditions.
And when he was home, we were a normal family, and we did our usual things, and he did his usual things with kids. And he was gone, we'd all sort of go into standby mode. Mom took care of things. And when he came home, it was like everything started up again. It was nice. The circus wheel started turning again.
Dad was always the romantic figure who went off on adventures and came back full of wonderful stories and great tales of distant lands and exotic foods and beautiful women. And of course have the movies, wonderful movies, to show all of his great adventures.
Over 5,000 miles from the Niagara Falls Aquarium, the sponsor for this expedition, south and south again to the Amazon, stopping off in British Guiana, a wild colonial part of Great Britain, over the Great Falls, and then again for hours till we reached the Amazon basin. 1,000 miles from the sea up the Amazon, the last civilization, Manaus. We had a wood-burning steamboat, one of the last two on the river, right out of a Humphrey Bogart saga. It was wonderful. And 3 days up to the Amazon, we found what we were looking for, the freshwater dolphin called Inia. Pink, long beaks, never seen before in North America. These would be the first, we hoped, to be brought back alive and started on their way in North America. We took the most outrageous liberties back in the old days. I blush to the roots of my hair to tell you this. And in Cayman, on the wreck of the Balboa, there are thousands of sergeant majors that just converge on anybody because they're used to being fed. So we had a girl I was working with remove all of her things and put down the skeleton, tuck the food in the rib cage. Tragedy struck. The feeder became the fed upon. In other words, we never outgrow home movies. At least I don't.
That's outrageous.
It was. pull a carrot, Ponker?
My father was always the real life and driving force in the family, and my mom was the maintainer, the real solid part.
Oh, look at that.
But my father, he was gone a lot. He'd be gone for 3 months at a time, and then he'd come home, he'd be back for a week or two, and then he'd be gone for another month or two.
I really believe that my mom put her foot down at that time and said either you take us as a family this time or perhaps they would make some drastic changes.
This is Stan Waterman speaking. Our destination this time, Tahiti. Only 5
We
hours
went to
today by jet
Tahiti
from Los Angeles.
specifically
Fulfilled
two
to the Western
reasons.
mind the embodiment of
The most
romance.
important, perhaps, was to have an adventure together as a family before the children were too old, were gone from the nest, and were so accustomed to comfortable, secure, privileged American suburbia that they didn't have any perspective about how other people live in a society as simple as Tahiti. But we wanted that adventure together as a family, and the time was then to do it by
This
ages.
is my oldest son, George. My youngster, Gar, both of them members of my diving team, of course. Susie was popping every male eyeball out in
The
Tahiti.
trip came at a time when I was 12 years old, and we were just starting to go out, and there were just starting to be dances and long telephone calls about boys and so on. And I was so resentful that we had to go and live in Tahiti, and I remember clearly just thinking, why me? Why do I have to go to the South Pacific with my family and be stuck there for a year and so on and so forth? And of course, in retrospect, it was a wonderful experience and brought our family very close together.
How do you move all this equipment? Well, you have to have a stout-hearted family behind you and give them a crisp command, as I've just done, and then set them loose.
I wanted to do a film with a whole year to work on it, with a family in it, take a chance on it amortizing all of those costs, which it did in the television sale I
I've
made.
worn out 5 families so far.
The first filming he did of us as children underwater in Tahiti was what he considered to be a great joke. We dove on a bomber that had sunk off of Papeete Airport.
Most planes land safely at the Fa'a'a airport. We unfortunately overshot the runway, which terminates abruptly in the lagoon.
And the door, we literally went inside of it with our little duffel bags, and the door opened from inside, and as a family, we all swam out.
Since my 3 children are going to spend a good part of this Tahitian year underwater with me, they might as well get used to it right away.
From then on, in Tahiti, he just took us everywhere with him.
It wasn't very glamorous, but it was tough, it was isolated, it was difficult, but it was wonderful. And it perhaps cemented the family more than anything else could, to be removed entirely from the American culture and society and to have to survive with just ourselves. And a few raw fish and a little barley, and you manage.
I was 9 when we first went to Tahiti. I remember a great deal from that year. It was really an extraordinary experience for a child to have. I was left mostly to my own devices and out of suburbia into basic tropical paradise.
They're going to draw the kids out now and see how they can do. Gar is horrified. His mentors, of course, are Batman and Robin, who wouldn't approve of this kind of behavior at all. So he puts up a stout resistance. My wife, Susie, instructed the children in tutoring sessions every morning for 5 hours at a time.
I remember several things about Tahiti, one of which was my mother trying to teach us a correspondence course that she'd had been trying to get us to follow. And I remember about 3-4 months into our time there, her sitting slumped in defeat in the room that we were all supposed to be studying. We were all itching to get outside, take off with Dad and go diving and chase sharks and ride manta rays and dig in the sand and climb hills and jump over waterfalls. It was the most exciting thing we'd ever seen.
But it was for distractions like this that we came halfway around the world. We never begrudged the children the time. In fact, we encouraged them to learn from the world around them. We decided to go underwater to bring the sharks even closer to the camera in a hand-feeding action.
Of course, diving with sharks was something that we'd all heard Dad had done. Finally, we were there too, and there were the sharks zooming around, and Mom afraid we'd all be dead, and which of course only added to the excitement.
And this time, holding the spear itself, the shark is drawn within 5 feet. As they start making passes at the gun, a feeding frenzy is in the makings here, and it's time to get out of the water fast. Whoops, and this is when we got out, fast.
And Gordy and I were with him, of course, when he was bent very badly in Bora Bora. And it was an experience that I'll never forget, nor will Gordy.
It happened when we were on Bora Bora at the end of that year that I lived with a family in Tahiti, and I was filming on the outer reef at Bora Bora.
I call this the ballet of the garden eels.
The old man had been down showing us garden eels.
These wonderful reed-like eels that have holes in the sand, and as you approach them, they just disappear like a mirage into the bottom.
We'd all been fascinated and so on and so forth. I think he was so busy showing us what was down there that he didn't get enough shots of it, so he decided to go back down again.
And he stayed too long, and he had too many dives that day.
And stayed down at 132 feet till I began sucking air on the tank. Stayed a little bit longer to get the last take, and then started up as fast as I could. I mean, all of these are infractions of the basic rules today. You don't come up like a rocket. And came up into the boat and was immediately cramped across the middle, which classic bends. It bends you over like that. And Gordy handed me another tank, and I went down and said, I've got the bends.
He knew right away that he was bent because he went onto the bow and just was writhing in pain.
And I thought that was pretty bad. And after about a half an hour, beginning to get chilled and feeling sorry for myself, I was hanging on the line. This snowstorm of picnic debris started floating down past me, Baby Ruth wrappers and a sardine tin. My children were having their picnic up on the boat while I was dying on the line. And I thought, oh my God, that I should be exposed to that.
It was very scary seeing your father out of control.
And it was quite horrifying. It was the end of the day, and Gordy was a kid, and so was I, and we ended up cutting the anchor off because we couldn't haul it up and getting back to the town of Bora Bora, where he did get help.
I was paralyzed on one side from the waist down, and motor controls lost on the other side, and the rest is a long odyssey. It took me all the way to Mururoa, where the French were having an atomic experiment, and the French government were just terrific in flying me out from Papeete, and got into a chamber there. It's the only chamber.
But it was frightening.
Anyway, it all came out well, and the only lasting effect was on my brain.
Children laughing, brown bodies in the sun, hair flying. This is the world for me.
But halfway through that year, in the almost soporific, unchanging climate of the tropics, we yearned for the freshness of Maine and New England, changing colors, and the easy, indolent pace of the tropics didn't appeal to any of us. Maybe a Protestant work ethic, something, I don't know what, but we were ready to come home, and we made ourselves stay to see the whole year through, which was good.
For the first time, we were really involved as a family with one of Dad's expeditions. And it was a year, and we saw each other every day and every night, and we were a real family, whereas we never really had been before.
This is the punch bowl, and it's so called on marine charts. Dad had this stained glass made when the house was built. This was wild land then, a cove called the Punch Bowl and a favorite picnic spot. When his ship came in, as it can do in enterprising America, he did well. He remembered this beautiful spot, and he bought it, probably for a song back on the eve of the Depression. He had the house built. He wasn't a sportsman, he was a hard worker, you know, and an enterprising man, but he didn't know about furnishing. And the interior decorator said, you've got to have animal skins on a floor of a big hall like this, Mr. Waterman. And people who've come to visit here have asked, where did your father bag those tigers? Well, they were bagged, I like to say, at the corner of Madison Avenue and 45th Street at Abercrombie and Fitch. We brought a lot of things into it ourselves. It wasn't like this exactly, furnished when I grew up. I mean, the amphora came from the Aegean Sea, sank with a ship 2,000 years ago from the island of Rhodes. These are the tops of amphoras. They're called potsherds, and I found them in a tomb, a submerged tomb called a sarcophagus, and brought them up and brought them back with me here to the States. And there are shells that are on the banisters from our year in Tahiti, bagpipes from the day when I was a blueberry farmer. You know, I couldn't even come close to affording a house like this today. Very few people can. It comes from a time when those things were possible, and an underwater cameraman and a diver does not have that sort of income. But if you care, you can take care of something like this. And when the children were growing up, we told them that we'd all better pull on the oars together or the boat would sink. And so they grew up knowing that we would work on this place ourselves. And we have. And we've made it work. We've filled it with our own things. We've loved it and passed that on to the grandchildren, too.
I don't know whether the kind of lives we have led would allow us to have a strong family. But I think the Punch Bowl has given us that chance. And I think we all understand that, and that's why we come back here every year. All of us. Children, grandchildren, pigs, rabbits, chickens. And somehow we make it all worthwhile with the family. By having a family, by keeping a family going, and by believing probably more than anything else in family.
Oh, yeah.
And then he said, dummy type is stupid.
Right, and if you're reading this right now, then you're probably stupid as well. And the guy who wrote it obviously had a great time putting that sort of
filling in this.
Yeah.
The word,
Yeah.
Gordy, the word is out. Oh, goodness. When is the grand finale when you will be devoured by that great white shark?
One could do worse than exit like that, Booney. Not with a bang, but a bite, as T.S. Eliot might have said.
I don't think white sharks grow big enough to carry you off in their jaws, sweetheart.
You are a miserable little that will
Oh,
not
great. Day in the morning. Noel Coward meets Dwight McDonald.
The big animals are still there. It'll be about the 5th time going back. Then you can watch them and study them.
I know I will be watching them because I will be along with you on that shoot, won't I?
No. You'll want some experienced hands with you on that shoot, won't you?
As the only
You can see how much it means to all of our children directly to be included in Stan's games.
You don't need them. I can do all those things myself.
They all still want to go, and each time they come back with a fuller life and a richer experience, and they all adore their father and the things they do with him.
I'll not have you children quarreling while I'm making my plans for the future.
This is serious business. They scrap for places on these trips. You know, they're making fun, but it's very serious stuff. Me.
My turn.
San Clemente Island is about 6 hours out from San Diego, the southern coast of California.
What we'll do is, these are Pacific mackerel, which I find are great shark bait.
We've gone here for sharks. I was here years ago, and there were great numbers of blue sharks then. But I've heard that they've been decimated by the gill net fishing, as so much has of the marine life. I want to see if they're still here.
You can swim in this door here.
Bob Cranston is your man for the blue sharks. He's made a profession of working with them. Cages for those who observe them.
You can swim right in it.
Chainmail suits to protect himself when he's working with people, working with the sharks, and so on. Bob knows these waters, knows how to work safely with these animals, and so he's our guide for this part of our work. Since I helped you put on your dancing pumps for your first date.
My first date out were around then, when Johnny Battle and I snuck out to the movies.
All three children, you know, worked with me. And when they came into their teens, we went off together one-on-one. I'd take one whosever turn it was to work with me. We lived in forecastles on island shores, and they were my ACs and gophers. For Susie, my daughter, this would be the second trip with me to the Red Sea.
We all knew that we were privileged in the sense that we were taken off on these extraordinary trips, and I think we all sort of took pleasure in casually dropping it to our friends that, yeah, well, we're off shooting whales in Argentina this year, and so on and so forth.
Clear water, we encountered a cow and a calf. As Gar watched, delighted, the calf gamboled about, displaying that ingenuous friendliness that makes puppies and children so enchanting the world over. The calf popped its head up right next to Susie. She touched it, a loving contact between two gentle, intelligent mammals.
Do you have something for, incidentally, for a little poking? For poking, exactly.
Yes, I have a spatula.
A spatula?
I brought a spatula, yes.
Well, here we go. Somebody would hand me my camera when I leave, please. Thank you. Come on, Tony.
Here I come.
Never really expected to find the gathering of blues that we had on this trip. They've been so diminished in numbers that the people who come out regularly, like Bob Cranston, say that you may go a day without any blue sharks or just one or two. We must have had 55, 60, so many it was hard to count. The water column was full of them. Bob actually induces a blue shark to bite his arm, showing Susie that the chainmail suit does really work.
There's a big sea lion down there, diving around amongst the blue sharks.
You can see how somebody can get bitten pretty fast, pretty badly, pretty easily.
It is really hard to be down there hanging on inside the caves. The swells are just knocking you around like a little bean in a pod. But it was beautiful. There are lots of sharks.
We may not see this much longer at the rate that they're being caught in the drift nets and the whole thing. I think we've had a very special sight today. With a sea lion tossed in. That's called egg in your beer.
I know, that was great.
Oh. That was terrific.
It was.
You know, I was thinking, it's just as well that Mom isn't here.
She'd be horrified.
Stan, do you think she should really go down there?
With a kitchen spoon.
Exactly. I remember in Tahiti when she wouldn't speak to me, when I let all of you kids come down to work with me with the sharks just inside the reef. Stan, I don't think this is safe.
Well, that is a lot to ask of a mother of 3 small children. One of them was 9 years old.
That's true, and she would still be just as worried.
Good work, the first dive, all right.
We certainly inherited from my father a very strong sense of independence. None of us like to be told what to do, and we all have sacrificed security to a large degree for following our own paths and doing what we want to do. A great deal of my work involves these architectural structures that serve as bases, contrasting with a very organic form, which perches on top or hangs down, and that influence certainly comes from a lot of the things I've seen underwater with wrecks, where you have the man-made steel structure and then these crazy organic shapes, sea fans, much like this shape, or soft corals, just those underwater things that have a certain rhythm and grace that isn't necessarily controlled by gravity.
My father has always believed that the key to his happiness was that he's made his vocation his avocation, which is making your work your hobby. And he's right. I grew up working with my father on a lot of his films. I was his assistant and his gopher. I loaded cameras, I carried bags, I filled tanks for him for a long time, and he showed me a wonderful lifestyle, and I've followed it myself. I'm a cameraman as well. I've been all over the place. I've done expeditions in Antarctica, Borneo, Russia, South America, China. It's a little bit haphazard since you never know when you're going to be home, but I'm probably having experiences that my father had when he was a filmmaker.
He has certainly been the most successful in terms of monetary stability of all of us. Although that's not fair when you compare him to me. I'm at the bottom end of the monetary stabilization chart. Following the typical starving artist routine. But
Well,
one day
I, of course,
when
have big plans for my designs, bed sheets.
oh yes,
My
Westport
sushi
Custom
sheets.
Beast is
Yes.
going to make you a fortune.
That's exactly right. This is one of a series of bed sheets that I've designed that I call sea sheets. And they're all different sea creatures that are meant to be the bottom fitted sheet on the bed and meant to be there as part of the furniture, to have the big poof rolled down in the morning and pulled off and just have a beautiful hand-painted beast on your bed. That is my triggerfish. And I have a big octopus here. And this is my crab design, which has proven to be quite controversial. And we're not sure that many people are going to want to sleep on a giant crab. And this is a ribbon fish.
There is always the hope that the ship will come in next year or next week or whenever, but hey, what else can we do? None of us would have it any other way.
All three children have strong artistic originality, and I know they have that from their mother. I'm okay, but I'm not a big creative artist.
Soldier fish and the blue angelfish, prominent residents of the daytime reef. And my old friend, the Spanish dancer, largest and most dramatic of the nudibranchs. Meanwhile, deep inside the old ship, we find some of the facilities still working after all these years. And given the fascination that Skin Diver magazine has for all divers, it shouldn't surprise us to find the ship's library well used by John Bound, somewhat perturbed at being interrupted.
My strength is really not in handling a camera, but in telling a story about what I'm experiencing in the sea.
Where we find the stingray far more accommodating. In fact, this one wants nothing more than to enjoy its midday nap in peace.
I try to make my films entertaining.
Hoping to find a quieter space, it instead develops an Excedrin headache.
They're not just animal behavior pieces, but they are doing things human beings involved with marine animals, with some humor.
This is also a sea cucumber. It plows through the sand, passing large quantities through its digestive tract. Good. What is sand to us is a prime banquet to this gourmand. Oh, I love to eat. Finally, certain of his conquest, the chauvinist male gives vent to the ecstatic victory cry of the bull penguin. On the sun deck, keen eyes scan the hills and mountains of the distant shore and not so distant shore. The obvious newness of the ship made the wreck seem even more wasteful and tragic. In the mixed cargo was a shipment of Johnny Walker Black Label Scotch. Our own tragedy was that we didn't hear about that until later. Susie swims up the side of the ship, looking like a tiny shrimp on a great cliff. That colossal tail, 20 feet across, belongs to the great southern right whale. This fellow inspects us with his left eye. Unable to believe that anything this weird would appear in his sea, he swings about and confirms it with his right eye. The basket star, or Gorgoncephalus, is an echinoderm, one of the starfish family. By night, it climbs to the top of the reef, expands its serpentine arms and myriad tendrils to feed on the planktonic life. Lionfish are surely the most exotic of the night dwellers. Their feathery, plume-like dorsal spines are extremely venomous, but they are not aggressive and are easily photographed. The moot point is, wrote Melville, whether Leviathan can long endure so wide a chase, so remorseless a havoc, whether he must not at last be exterminated from the waters. And why should we try to understand the lives of whales? their obscure patterns of behavior, their songs, their grotesque encapsulated bodies, if they will soon be gone? The answer lies perhaps in man's growing sympathy towards the other animals with which he shares this planet. His fairly recent preoccupation with problems of his own survival on Earth have made him more aware. The death of an animal, not essential to his own survival, inevitably touches and diminishes his own life. John Muir said it a generation ago. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And what of the potato cod? Those obese, corpulent, bloated, drooling clowns. As long as the world's food supply holds out, they'll be around and looking for divers. But the Scotch mist may never be in the Coral Sea again. There are still many other seas to explore. When the play has been played and the tank has been drained and you return to home base with a goodly store of memories for company, it's a very special privilege to have such a beautiful lady awaiting you.
Extending southward from the bottom of California is the Baja Peninsula. That peninsula forms on its eastern side the Sea of Cortez between it and the Mexican mainland. About 2/3 of the way down the Baja is the port of La Paz, and this is the gateway to the Sea of Cortez.
It's been a long time. Thank you. It's good to have you.
It's some years since I've been in the Sea of Cortez. I remember it as being a wonderful diving area, diverse, prolific marine life, but there's been a lot of pressure on it since. I don't know if it'll be the same.
But the steam out is just 8 miles further out that way.
Maybe early tomorrow morning when the weather
Either that or we could spend the day here tomorrow. I don't know. The sea lions are such wonderful things to work with.
Well, I defer to you and any thoughts you have about where we're going to go and when we're going to dive here. There's an expression from Wordsworth, in which he says, Wordsworth the poet, said that the child is father of the man. And what Wordsworth meant was that the child has exceeded the father and gone beyond him. And there are two people in my life at this stage who fulfill that observation. One is my son Gordy, who became such a fine cameraman that he way outran me in his excellence with a camera. And the other is Howard Hall, who I started with when he was an apprentice with us when we were shooting the deep. Over the years, he's gradually improved his own craft until he's become, I consider, the finest underwater cinematographer we have in this country today.
You have to be around in an area for 10 years before you begin to see any difference. New divers come out here and they think it's spectacular. They just don't know what they missed years past.
Well, Socorro
is still
is going to give it to us.
Sea lions populations are growing here, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Nothing else is growing here, but the sea lion populations are. Yeah. In fact, that the whole Sea of Cortez. If we stay in the Sea of Cortez, you know, you're going to see less and less fish. Certainly from when you first came down here, both you guys. There just aren't near as many fish as there used to be, and that's just a direct result of the Mexicans finally figuring out nets.
Well, on this trip, I think we'll see the change in the difference between Socorro and here that's had all this pressure.
You haven't been to Socorro?
I've never been. I think you've been probably as much as anybody diving.
Well, I
5 times.
I don't think that's true, but Socorro looks a lot like the Sea of Cortez looked 10 years ago.
Mike, can we see on the chart where Socorro Island is? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, let me show you right here. You know, we've been working up here in the Sea of Cortez right now, just out of La Paz. And we'll go down and we'll run down the East Cape. Basically, right off Cabo San Lucas, we've got 218 miles to go to Benedicto.
Oh my gosh, it's way out in the middle of nowhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and Benedicto's this time of year should be great for the giant mantas. Lots of sharks. Right. And then you'll be going from there to Socorro.
Is that the last land we're going to see before Socorro?
Yeah, that's the southern end of Cerrado. That's it. The next thing we should notice is the Pacific swell as we go around the point here, and then we'll know we're in the open ocean.
To find a virgin marine area, one that hasn't been hard used by diving and commercial fishing, you have to go far afield. We went 2 days due south from the end of the Baja Peninsula out into the open Pacific to 2 tiny remote islands that are just dots on your map called Socorro and San Benedicto. They're volcanic islands. They are so isolated that they've not really been impacted yet by commercial fishing and divers.
Where that dark stuff is.
Yes.
And that's where the lava, I think it was about 40 years ago, this last erupted, and the lava flowed out and poured into the sea, and that's what that big dark area is.
We hope that we may find the big marine animals there. The mantas that have almost disappeared from the areas we used to dive in the Sea of Cortez. The mantas should be there, and also, of course, sharks. I'm really pretty excited about going down here.
Oh, I can't wait.
After all these years. I'm excited again about a dive in a new place. It's been fine.
Why don't, if you guys don't mind, why don't you and I go? There's a lot of sharks here. This is the hot place for sharks, and if we all go and we're going to run them off, and they probably won't be here for the next dive.
As much as I hate leaving you nippers behind, let's go for trying to get it on the first run.
Come on, you go, ready?
I feel good about it.
I think it brings us closer to our huge inheritance, don't you?
It
Each
does.
time he sets foot in the water.
The sooner he gets gobbled down by a big tiger shark, the better off we're all going to be.
In fact, today I was thinking this would be a good way for him to go.
Well, he's
Carried off in the jaws of a giant Galapagos shark.
He's pushing 69, too.
Yeah.
He's about outlived his useful life.
Yeah, his usefulness to us in any case.
The only problem was if he was gone, we wouldn't be able to come along on great trips like this.
Whenever Dad goes underwater, I feel I have no fear for him. Do you ever fear for him?
No,
I
never.
really don't. Maybe it's just growing up around him for so many years.
He's been at it for so many years, and he's never had any trouble with sharks.
Well, those chances are getting slimmer and slimmer.
You have to attract sharks to you. They're essentially shy. They stay their distance. They know where you are before you've even seen them. So we have to put down baits. And we set this bait out on the reef and then withdraw and wait quietly, hoping they will come. Isn't that funny? When you don't want them, they come around. And when you want them the way we do, they take a powder.
Well, it's pretty amazing how how difficult it is to get close to man-eating sharks.
Despite what the public thinks.
That's right, despite what the public thinks. It's entirely the opposite case.
I think you have to be in movie making to find that out, maybe.
That's true, you definitely do.
There it is. It's a dead weight now.
It is. He's coming in just
It
under the
has to
boat.
be a tuna with the amount of time it took.
There he is.
Oh,
there he is.
God, look at that.
Oh, he got chomped.
Holy
Oh, it's been
smokes.
bitten in half.
He got chomped.
Oh, my
Cut
God.
in half, which is what has
that,
happened.
that is some big animal,
man,
a
look
shark
at
that took
that.
that back out.
Look at that bite. Clean
That,
off.
that will show you what a shark can do in a big shark.
You can imagine how fast that tuna is swimming, even on a hook. You know, it's moving along pretty fast, and for a shark to catch it and grab it in one bite and take half of it like that, that's pretty impressive.
I would guess a tiger, only because they are so big. What do you think?
I don't have a clue what we're going to get here. I mean, we know there's Galapagos sharks here, and there's some silver tips here, but there's probably also tiger sharks here. I just don't know what we're going to bring in. So,
of course, I'm especially concerned. I don't care too much what happens to you, but I don't want I don't want my kids to get bitten.
And I'll just wait there until you signal that I can come closer, if indeed I am allowed closer.
Well, through all of the years you've been growing up, you've disobeyed all of my orders.
So why should you think I'd obey you now?
Exactly, but you seem to have prospered doing it.
I will certainly
All
obey.
right.
Sharky shish.
Oh, sharky shish kebab. I think the most poignant and meaningful statement that I've ever come upon about the relationship of the human race to the animals with whom we share the planet is something that was written by Henry Beston, a Harvard naturalist, in his book called The Outermost House. He wrote this: "We need a newer and a wiser and perhaps a more mystical sense of the animal. Remote from universal nature and living by complicated artifice, man in civilization regards the animal through the glass of his knowledge and sees thereby a feather greatly magnified and the whole image in distortion. We patronize them for their incompleteness, their tragic fate of having been formed so far below ourselves, and thereby we err, and greatly err. For the animal shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they live finished and complete, gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations, caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and the travail of the earth." big buster.
Yeah, that was the first big manta I've seen underwater. The first one? The first big one, yeah.
The rope we left down there from the last dive isn't
It's
there.
gone.
You know, as soon as we leave and the bubbles go away, the sharks come in.
Yeah.
And they know we're there. They just don't feel like coming around with all the noise.
Maybe we better have a little quiet go down.
Yeah, I think
maybe just
it
the
helps.
two of us.
It helps to minimize the noise.
Okay, a new rhythm.
Oh, different beat. New rhythm, yeah.
Time to really get down.
Oh, I like this one.
We had plenty of seafood. Our brains must have expanded enormously. That was a tuna twist. It'll be popular all over the States when they see this. Okay, going over.
Okay. The bait too.
Okay, Howard has camera and bait?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let him have it. You're taunting him. Well, I'm probably gonna bring him right up onto the platform. Oh, he got the good rope. Well, what happened? Why are you up so early?
Because we didn't even get down with the bait before it started.
Before it was over, we had 2 tiger sharks and probably 6 globular sharks tearing into everything. Visibility went down to 15 feet.
Visibility was so bad you didn't know where they were coming from. It's the most dangerous thing I've ever been in my life. I'm so glad to be alive and not a basket case.
Did you shoot it though?
Oh no!
No!
Oh no!
Well, of course, we turned the cameras on simply for protection. But I never held the camera still. I was just doing this with it all the time. Whack, whack, whack.
It was shoving them off, noses onto the lenses. I had to turn to see if the lens had been abraded or had been speared off by.
No, it was one of those dives. You're probably thinking, I wish I'd been there. You couldn't be more glad you weren't. It was an absolute nightmare.
Oh, I won't feel we've made it till we're on that duck board and up on that
We have to tell you that we had a huge tiger come right up here to the stern of the boat.
Really?
And we weren't going to see anything if you hadn't got anything in the can.
Well, I'm glad he was here, because if he'd been there, that would have been just one too many tiger sharks.
We didn't need another one.
We didn't need any more sharks.
Without a doubt. The most dangerous thing I've ever been in with sharks. That was the quintessential horror show.
I dropped the bait before I was 10 feet below
Really?
the surface. And fortunately, it sank all the way down, went between a couple rocks. Before we knew it, we had sharks everywhere. And then that haze layer from the volcanic ash moved in, and we couldn't see 10 feet. And then we started seeing tiger sharks. That's just what we needed to see.
That's what made us so
one tiger
dangerous.
shark, then 2 tiger sharks, 6 Galapagos sharks, and the Galapagos sharks were really big. And everything, just tearing into everything.
Chewing on the bait as close as you are, teeth gnashing, things bumpy.
The scariest thing I saw.
Absolute nightmare. What the hell have they been waiting for?
There was a Galapagos shark came down when Stan had his back turned. It was in filming the sharks eating the bait, and a big Galapagos shark, about 9 feet long, came down, put its nose on the top of Stan's head, and started sniffing it. That far away from his head.
No, I didn't even know he was there. You
But
couldn't keep your eye on
he was
them.
thinking Stan's head looks like a side of tuna. Doesn't smell like tuna. That's the question.
I had my Lucky Tiger hair tonic on. That's what
Man, I
saved
tell
me.
you that, and I thought he was going to have his head bitten right off. I really did.
We learn a lot each time, and I learned enough to know that enough is enough.
Enough is enough. Oh God. Well, yeah. I think the famous quote in Jaws was, "Can we go home now?" This is where I'm getting off every bit of tuna oil I can, so that when I sleep tonight, I won't have as bad a dreams as I'm likely to have. Oh Lord.
Howard's using a little air there.
Yeah.
No, that's my ear that you hear.
That's what I want you to
I'm
know,
using
too.
a fair amount of it.
Right next to the camera. Whoop, see that hairpin turn? With those pectorals down, they can turn so fast you can't keep an eye on them. They'd be in behind you.
Black.
In the middle of all of that,
the realization that you can really lose a leg or have a terrible bite, and once there's one bite, the whole thing would have become a worse nightmare than it
I'm
was.
not holding the camera very still. Look at this.
Man, look at that.
You look at this stuff and everything seems to be going relatively slow on the film, but when you're down there, it seems to be happening 1,000,000 miles an hour.
It also looks very clear.
Here comes another one. That's another
Yeah,
size.
it's starting to mark
Yeah.
up.
The one bite on one human down there and all of that mad bait taking and everything, and it would be completely out of control, and both of us would have been in dire jeopardy. It was a genuine jeopardy situation, and all of this business and all of these years of filming and working with sharks almost come together and focus on this one time. This is something I really wouldn't want to do again like this. We've been thinking and dreaming about that for a long time. A woman is only a woman, sir. But a good cigar is a smoke.
Hear, hear, Toe. Well spoken.
It was my friend Ruddy Kipling who said that.
Your friend, Ruddy?
Do you know, I have a real story about Longfellow, the great autocrat at the breakfast table, said that life is composed of action and passion. He said, it behooves us each to take our measure of that action and passion at risk of having been judged not to have lived at all. And so the whole business of what most of us have been a part of here and all the things that we've done in the Tahiti years, Peter and I with our shark quests, and you children growing up working with me in the forecastles of the boats in the summers and so on, is taking the tide as it serves us and making the most of what I call a short time between womb and tomb. It's there and you have it, and of course grabbing what was given to us in this house and holding on to it, and this place is also all part of that.
Real